You are watching BVC Television Network, Caribbean Body Talk. My name is Herman Hall, the editor-publisher of Everybody's Caribbean Magazine. Today we are going to discuss elections in the United States. As a journalist in the Caribbean American community, over the years, I've heard many Caribbean nationals say that elections in the Caribbean are very, very easy, much easier than elections in the United States. Well, yes, you are correct. Elections in the Caribbean, on election day, you vote for one person. It's as simply as that. You live in a parish, you vote whoever is representing that parish, the candidates who are seeking that office. In the United States, you have the federal government, the state government, and city or municipal governments, and each one of them have their own elections. However, what is called the general election, all those elections take place together. So when you get a ballot, the ballot also reflects federal positions, state positions, and municipal elections. So this is why sometimes it's difficult to read. Now, once every 4 years, one will vote for the presidency of the United States. And even on that ballot, there are other people running. People may be running for city council, for a state assembly, for a local senatorial race, and all that is lumped into one ballot. In New York State, sometimes you are given two ballots, or to put it this way, you are given one ballot divided into two parts. So we have to understand the difference between the American system and the Caribbean system, where there are so many elections in one. Now, in June, July, in the spring, we have what we call the primaries in the United States. The primaries is essentially they are selecting who is going to represent the party. In the Caribbean, the political leader of the head of his or her party will select among the candidates within his or her party who is going to represent his or her party in the general election. In the United States, rather than the political leader of the party choosing it, it is the people, we the people, through primaries. So once spring, summer ends, and each candidate is elected that will represent his or her party in November, that is called the general election. So every first Tuesday in November, it is called the general election in the United States. And this is where you could have a presidential election, you could have other sorts of elections. Now, basically, in this particular decade or time, we are hearing about vote by mail, which is highly controversial. But it is controversial made, that controversy basically is due to some of the political leaders. Vote by mail is the way of the future. As a matter of fact, 5 states, Hawaii, Idaho, and 3 other states have been voting by mail for the last 5 years. But unfortunately, in recent years, we have been hearing how bad vote by mail could be. But vote by mail is the way of the future. And there is, within another maybe 10, 15 years, election day, or in the days leading up to election, you may be voting at home. So this system has already started. Now, I want to preface to what we are discussing. Every state in the United States have its own election system. Elections in general is really ruled or governed by the governor of each state. So elections in New York State, the rules and regulations may be different to elections in Florida or in Michigan or in Massachusetts. So for the purpose of this conversation, most of what we are going to be discussing will be applicable to New York State in particular. Now, vote by mail, the most topical subject in our lifetime right now. There are different ways. In New York State, you have to request a ballot to vote by mail. In other states, a ballot is mailed to everyone. But in New York State, you actually have to request it. Then they will send you, the Board of Election will send you the ballot. And you can give any reasons. You will be out of town. You will be having an operation the day. Your mother-in-law may be sick that day. So you prefer to vote by mail. But vote by mail is just only one way. In New York State and in other states now, there are 3 opportunities to vote by the first Tuesday in November. There are 3 ways. One, as I said, you could vote by mail. But in New York State, to vote by mail, you have to actually request a ballot from the Board of Election weeks before the election. The second opportunity, which has been introduced to New York State, and other states have been doing it, some other states, is what we call early voting. Early voting gives you an opportunity. It's 9 days. So you have 9 days to go vote early. So on election day, you do not have to go to the polls. And then the third opportunity is the final opportunity and the final day. That is where, if you did not vote by mail or you did not do advance ballot, you could definitely go to the poll site. So these are the 3 basic ones. Now in New York State, I want to give you the voter, and many of us are immigrants. We are all excited to vote. We know that voting in the Caribbean in particular is always exciting. But there are times where we can get overzealous. We can be so excited that we can, what we call, spoil the vote. Spoil the vote. In the state, they will say you have, they will not tell you in a nice way that you spoiled the vote. They will say you have overwritten the vote. But basically, I will explain to you what is a spoiled ballot or your overvote. Now, let us take the vote by mail or vote through absentee ballot. That is the one where we all make the most crucial mistake. That one is mailed to you, and you have to mail it back. Now, in that envelope in New York State, there is the ballot, and then there is 2 other envelopes. So when you get that absentee ballot, there are 2 other envelopes enclosed in the big envelope. Number 1, you can vote, but if you did not put your signature on the ballot or on the envelope, because the ballot is private, so your name will never be on the ballot because we do not know your name. They do not want to know who you vote for. That's your private right. But your signature will be on the ballot. On the envelope, not on the ballot. It will be on the envelope. And why do they need your signature? If your signature is not there, the vote is invalid. It's a spoiled vote. Now let me give you the reason. There are a lot of young people who do not know their history, and you cannot blame them. They were not here during the civil rights movement. But for those people, including Caribbeans who fought and gave their life in the United States in the 40s, 50s, and 60s for the right to vote, in the South, when blacks were given the opportunity to vote, they said you have to bring a voter registration card. So what happened 30, 40 years ago? You brought your voter registration card before the election day. And when you arrive and you meet this Caucasian racists, some of them, they say, sorry, we don't have your picture, because they have already seen who you were. You were a black person. So they conveniently, they got rid of your photo. New York State and some states in the north, they realize that, and it is only signature. So once they have your signature, they know you are the person, once the signature matches. So if anytime you go to vote in New York State, and perhaps in some of the other states in the north, and they ask you for your photo, you are not obligated to do it. As a matter of fact, if a poll worker asks you for your photo in New York State, that poll worker can be thrown in jail. It's against the law. That's the reason they are asking you to give your signature. So when you sign, your signature will be scanned for the next election. And on the next election, they will compare the 2 signatures so they will know it's you. So yes, so you get that ballot in the mail, You were so fast, you were so businesslike, you were busy, you didn't look at it. You just vote for the person and you put it in the envelope and you sent it back. It didn't work. Your vote was no good. There is one more item on it. Apart from the signature on the ballot, on the envelope, you have to put the ballot in an envelope and then put that envelope in another big envelope for mailing. So if you did not put your ballot in the first envelope, when it arrives at the respective board of election, that ballot will not be counted. Why? Because nobody knows if the post office or your neighbor or someone tampered with your envelope with your ballot. On the other hand, if it is put in as one small envelope and that envelope is sealed and placed in another big envelope, then they know nobody interfered with it. Thirdly, we're talking about seal. The envelope must be sealed. You'll be amazed to know, especially among Caribbean immigrants and other immigrants in general, they get it, they voted, they did not put a signature, they did not enclose it in the small envelope, they just put it in the regular envelope and mail it back. So that is not going to count. Now on presidential times, especially, but you have sometimes heated mayoral races. In this country, you may have someone who is a Democrat or who is a Republican, but there are other small parties affiliated to the two big parties. So for example, the Liberal Party is affiliated, let us say, with the Democratic Party, and the Conservative Party is, let us say, affiliated with the Republican Party. Then in New York State, we have various other ones that could be on the ballot. So what you have to do, some people, they will register as a liberal. So the name on election day, the ballot will have about 4 or 5 or 6 parties listed. And each candidate name will be on the party they are associated with. So for example, assuming you belong, let us say, to Party Century. And Party Century is the main party. But there are other small ones, Party Yes, Party Day, Party Hour. They are all part of Party Century. But the candidate may be under all three, but you only could vote for the candidate once. So I know in several elections, the voter is so excited, they see the candidate they are in love with, they really want to vote for the candidate, and they see the candidate name mentions 3 times on the ballot. Yes, the candidate name is there 3 times, but you only could vote for the candidate 1 time under one party. So you could, if you are a Republican, you may want to vote for the candidate under the Republican line, or you can vote for that same candidate under the Conservative line. If you're a Democrat, you may want to vote as a Democrat, or you may want to vote as a member of the Liberal Party. And there are young voters especially who are not part of both parties. Most people in New York actually are not members of both parties. They are what you call independent. But in the general election, they can vote for anyone they want. So that sums up some of the mistakes that you will find that a voter makes. The voter did his job or her job, but the vote was not counted. Now you're watching BVC Television Network, and you're looking at Caribbean Body Talk. Welcome back. You're watching BBC Television Network, Caribbean Body Talk. My name is Herman Hall, the publisher, editor of Everybody's Magazine. We were talking about mail-in voting. Just to summarize, there are 2 kinds of vote by mail. In New York State, you actually have to request your ballot by mail. In other states, it's automatically, or in some other states, it's automatically mailed to you. But for New York State, you must request vote or an absentee ballot. Now, we are from the Caribbean, many of us, and we have friends and family who have retired and they're in the Caribbean, and they're American citizens and they will love to vote. Yes, they can vote. They have to do that at least about 4 or 5 weeks in advance. They go to the local American embassy or consulate in their respective country where they retired at and enjoying life, and they can request the ballot, and then yes, they will vote, and it will eventually get to the respective city, town, and the respective board of election. Now again, we were talking about how not to spoil your vote if you do exercise the option of voting by mail. Now, the second one is early voting, which is a new component, and other states have been doing it. Some other states, New York State only recently started it in 2019, which is 9 days of early voting. And what are the advantages? The advantage is this: on election day, you do not have to go to the poll, and you have 9 days to do it before. However, there's a small difference. There are only 20, in Brooklyn, for example, there are about 20 special poll sites where you can do early voting. The same thing applies for other parts of New York State. So you cannot go to your regular poll site and vote and do early voting. There are specific ones, and you have 9 days to do it. Now, if you vote by mail or you did early voting, and you still choose to go to vote on election day, you can, but it will not be counted because you only could vote once. You cannot beat the system. So, for example, if you did early voting, and on election day, your friend is also going to vote, or your hubby or your spouse, and say, oh, I'm going to go with you and I'm going to vote again. The computer will automatically tell you that you have already voted. So there are a lot of parts in the system that will know that you have already voted. Now, vote by mail is also economical. You don't have, as I said, you don't have to go back and forth. You have that option. And then let us say you decided to change your mind in how you voted. You can also go on election day and vote by affidavit, and then the Board of Election will determine which one to take. And I want to use the word affidavit. Affidavit is a scary term for many voters. An affidavit basically certifying that you are the person. So for example, in New York State, if you arrive from planet Mars, in all the states, as a matter of fact, because this is federal voting regulations, that no voter must be turned away. As long as you're two-legged and you say you're a human being, and they can prove that you're a human being, you can vote. So if you arrive from Mars or the moon on election day, and you said, I want to vote, the Board of Election cannot deny you that right. If you arrive from, let us say, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Barbados, any place on election day, even though you are not an American citizen, and you are a visitor and you arrive at the poll site and you say you want to vote, yes, the law states that no person should be turned away. But the question is, will your vote be counted? And the answer is no. And that is where the affidavit comes in. However, the affidavit essentially tells the Board of Election that you are not a person, because after the election, months after and weeks after, if it is a close election, poll workers will be working around the clock to verify your affidavit. So when they see your name, John Doe, and they look at the election list, there is no John Doe listed, they know that your vote is not good, it wasn't counted, it was thrown away. You will get a nice letter in the mail telling you that you violated election law, warning you can be thrown in jail for dishonesty. But there are times though when affidavits are good. So it is not every affidavit vote that is not counted. Some are valid, some are counted. So for example, suppose you get married. Let us say you are Jane. Jane Harris, and you got married, and on election day you went and you gave the name Jane Joseph. There is no record of Jane Joseph with your birth date, and they say, well, how? But you insist that you have to vote. You insist, so you will get what you call an affidavit. But then you will mention that you were once Jane Harris, and they will compare, and they will say, oh yes, this is Jane Harris. She is now married and she's now Jane Joseph. So that affidavit will be counted. There are times political parties, I'm sure that happens to many of us in the community, you have representatives in the summer, in the spring, in the winter, trying to recruit people to be a member of the party. So at that time, in trying to get as many people to become member of a particular party, the address may not have been clear, or some of the information is insufficient. So the Board of Election would have had your signature, you would have applied to be a registered voter, they accepted it. But there is a 90% that you are the person, but there is a 10% chance that certain data is missing. So in that case, they may say, okay, present your driver's license or present a utility bill to prove that you are the person. So in this case, your ballot will be counted. But you have some people also who come to the poll and they are arguing, and here is a typical case. Many Americans, immigrants as well as non-immigrants, many Americans, they tend to vote once every 4 years. Quite a high percentage. They only concerned with the presidential. And there were 3 years before they did not vote. So in some jurisdictions, the Board of Election may remove your name, or they may have it as inactive. So your name is not on the current voter registration list. But you said, no, my wife voted, but my name isn't there. But your darling wife, in the last 3 years, she went to vote for the mayoralty, for the seats in the assembly in the 3 years. But you stayed home. You said you're only going to vote once every 4 years for the presidency. So your wife went every year between the last presidential election and the current presidential election. So they have your wife as active, she's a good voter, she voted, so her name is there. But you didn't do that maybe for 4, 5, 6 years. And now you want to go vote, so your name is inactive. In that case, they will ask you to vote by affidavit. You will fill the affidavit form, you will put all your particulars, and then in the weeks coming, they will check it out and they will say, yes, you are a registered voter. So voting by affidavit does not mean that your vote did not count. But most affidavit ballots are thrown out because it's not valid. As I said before, especially I have had friends who boasted to me in the years saying, oh, the American system is no good. I gave them my name and they gave me a ballot. But what my friend didn't tell me, they gave him a specific ballot, which is what you call an affidavit ballot. So his ballot, he or she, the ballot did not go through the scanner machine. It was placed in an envelope and sent to the Board of Election. So what we have to be careful about, especially in the American political climate in present times, that the politicians will be saying anything to disrupt the voters. Some politicians, that is. But you have to go by the administrative part of voting. So the affidavit ballots are very essential and your vote can be counted. Don't walk away from the poll and say, I'm not voting affidavit. There is a reason why you are being asked to vote by affidavit. And here is the final point. If you vote by affidavit and you are indeed a legitimate voter, the next election, they would have had your current information. So the next election, you will go proudly, my name is so-and-so, and there you are. They hand you your ballot, welcome, good evening, good morning, and you go do your voting. Now, the final one will be election day. And now again, in New York State, you have 3 opportunities to vote. Vote by mail or absentee ballot, early voting, which is for 9 days, the 9 days before the election. And if you are definitely lazy, or you're busy, or you procrastinate, and you wait, it's like some people, they prefer to shop on Christmas Eve, not in the days before Christmas. So you have voters like that. Some voters, you could tell them what, and they prefer to be all hyped up and emotional, and they go vote on election day. So you have that third opportunity, that is to vote on election day. But when you go to vote on election day, as I said, if you did early voting, the system will know that you did early voting. But that is that opportunity. The disadvantage of waiting for last minute is that depending, the lines will be long and long and long. For those of us who are old enough to remember 2008, when a man named Barack Obama, the first black person as a presidential candidate, the lines were long, as we say, from here to Timbuktu. And you had to wait for hours. But you could avoid all of those things now. The system is created for you to participate, to vote. So make sure you take that opportunity. Now, on election night, polls close at 9 p.m. in New York State. In some other states, it varies. It closes at 9 p.m. But if you are in the line at 9 p.m. or before, you are still eligible to vote. So sometimes you hear this tell you the poll closes at 9 p.m., but you're in line and you're entitled to vote. I do hope that you're enjoying this information brought to you by BBC Television Network. Should you wish to contact me, you can do so at editor@Everybody's Magazine. This is my email, editor@Everybody's Magazine. Thank you.